When you're about to record into your DAW, there's a number of things you want to get in place before you start recording. And I'd like to give you a short checklist of things to remember before you start recording onto an audio track. The first thing you'll do is create the necessary track. And you want to be careful if you create a mono or stereo track. And remember, the mono or stereo designation is really talking about the input of the track. The output of the track is pretty much always going to be stereo, in that you have a pan knob that can put it in the left or right channel. But the input makes a really big difference. If I'm recording with a single microphone or a single pickup, we want to make sure we create a mono track. If you were to record into a stereo track, that signal will go into the left speaker, and it's very hard to get it centered again. So make a mono track most of the time. If you're making a stereo track, that would be for maybe a synthesizer that's a stereo output, but most of the time when you're recording audio is going to be a mono track. You make your track and then name it. Every time you record, the file that's created is named by the name of that track. And if you don't name your tracks, you'll end up with this huge folder full of names like Audio 1-1, Audio 1-2, which really isn't that helpful. If things are named properly, you'll much better be able to, say, organize your files and possibly recover from a crash. So you want to name things very carefully. The next thing you want to do is set your levels, and we talked about the level setting procedure in a previous week. Just review that and make sure you do all that in the proper order. Remember, turn down your gain, plug in the instrument, turn on phantom power, check your settings. Those are the usual level setting procedure. Then you want to record enable the track, but be careful. When you hit that record enable button, it's going to turn on input monitoring, which means the input of the track will be sent directly to the output right when you hit that button. And this is a chance that you really can get feedback. If you have a microphone in the room and you have speakers active, when you hit that record button, you may get feedback, so be very careful. In fact, I would suggest for this whole procedure, if you're recording someone else, tell them to take off their headphones. And for yourself, bring down the level of your speakers. You really want to avoid those kind of loud feedback moments. Your performer will never do a good performance if they get that loud feedback once, because they'll always be worried every time you reach for the mouse. So be very careful with their ears and your own. And I would suggest after you have everything set, that's when you bring up the level of the speakers. After you've record enabled the track, you're going to want to turn on the click and count off. It's really important to have a click in the speakers so the player can be in time, and you want to have that count off ahead of time. So something to figure out in your DAW, just exactly how to turn those on. Once you have those configured, you have the track record enabled, you've checked your levels, it's time to record. In this example, I'll be recording an electric bass performance along with a MIDI drum groove, and I'll be using this as a way to demonstrate all the things that must be configured before you record and how to make the recording go smoothly. The first thing we want to do is set up the project with the appropriate settings. Now I'm plugging my bass directly into my interface, so I want to make sure my buffer size is low so I can reduce latency and play it in time as best as possible. Let's start with the audio preferences. I've chosen my input and output device, and I have a low enough buffer size for kind of in-time recording. I have my bit depth set to 24-bit recording, and I'm also going to check and make sure in the project settings my sample rate is 48K or 48,000 Hertz. Everything looks set up properly there. I'll need a new track to record onto, and I'll be creating a mono audio track since this is a single channel device. It's a single cable plugging the bass into my interface. I'm only recording one channel, so I'll set the format to mono. I've plugged this into the second input of my device, so I'll choose input 2, and I'll create it right now. Now before I hit record, I want to be very aware that as soon as I hit record, the audio from my bass will be going to my speakers. Not a big deal now, but if it was a microphone, something I really want to be aware of. I'll record enable this, and earlier when I had plugged in my bass, I had turned the gain, the input microphone preamp gain, all the way down. I'll play a note of my bass and turn up that microphone preamp gain. And we're starting to see some good levels there. Oh, sounds like a little distortion. I'll back it off a bit. Always trust your ears instead of the meters. The meters inside of a DAW can be a little off. Sometimes you can hear distortion before you see it there. I'm trusting the meters on the outside of my interface to set the appropriate levels. I'm just going to play a little bit and make sure the levels are where I want them to be. And I'm hitting about 3/4 of the way up on my external meters. I'm kind of in the yellow, which is perfect. It seems like I'm ready to record. I'll make sure my click is on and my track is record enabled. Oh, remember, we always have to name our track first. Double click, I'll call this eBass, and I'm ready to go. That way the audio files that are created when I record will be named well. Let's try it out. All right, I'm happy with that performance. Let's hear it back. I'll turn off the click and try it from the top. It's pretty good, but there are some slight things in there I don't love. So what I'll do is duplicate the track. Let's create another copy of it. Call this eBass 2. Turn record enable off on that one. On this one, I'll mute this track so we don't hear it, and I'll take another try at this. This way, I can edit between them and choose the best one I want down the road. Now that I've done some recording, I'd like you to see what was created in the hard drive. This is the project folder. We have the Coursera recording example, a session file, that's the logic file. I have an undo folder that includes some data from before the video. I had tried some things and undone that, so we have some undo data there. And I have an audio files folder that includes all the recordings as separate audio files. You see I have an eBass track, and I have an eBass 1 and 2 recording, and I have an eBass 2 track, and I have eBass 2 recording number 1. If I was to record again right now, let's just try it from this point on. We get another eBass 2 number 2, and we get a recording called eBass 2 number 2 wave file in our hard drive. No matter what you're recording or which DAW you're using, the steps are going to be the same. First, you'll check your settings, then you'll create a track, remembering to choose mono or stereo depending on your input. You'll have to name the track, record enable the track, set your levels using the microphone preamp, enable your click and count off, and then hit record. If you don't know how to do those steps in your DAW, I'd like you to take a moment to go to your program and figure it out now. If you're having trouble figuring this out on your own, please go to the forums and ask there. I'm sure there's someone here that has experience enough to help you through setting up recording in your DAW.